competition which is happening right now. This is the amazing group of highly talented AI ML builders who have been tasked to actually build an AI product. They actually started last night and they have 36 hours across the next couple of days to build something that can be delivered. And this is the next hackathon competition. It's co-sponsored by Red Bull, and it's to deploy the product by the end, and they're gonna have a chance to win $50,000 of a prize pool. We have AWS as our infrastructure partner. We have Shellcode as our technology partner. And this is obviously to help empower our participants to rapidly build, scale, and deploy Gen AI powered applications. So they're gonna have these experts on hand to help them out for the next couple of days, but it's gonna be fun to see what we're gonna get by the end of this 36 hours. All right, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, to our final speaker for the first half of day one here at SuperAI, talking about agent-driven software development. We have the co-founder and CTO of Factory, Ino Reyes, coming up on stage.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, my name is Ino. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Factory. And at Factory, we believe that the way we build software is radically changing. We're transitioning from the era of human-driven software development to agent-driven software development. You can see glimpses of this today. However, it seems like right now we're still trying to figure out what are the pathways towards that future of agent-driven development. There are incremental improvements available, tools like the IDE that were primarily designed, first and foremost, for human beings to write every single line of code. And you can add AI on top of those tools, right? You can add autocomplete, you can add a chat assistant. But undoubtedly, the amount of code that we're going to write by hand is falling very quickly to zero, right? And we're seeing enterprises and large organizations that are saying, look, we got 10, 15% gains in productivity when we adopted an AI native IDE. But where is that 10x that all of the AI practitioners are saying is going to happen, right? There's a quote that's attributed to Henry Ford. He said, if I had asked people what they had wanted, they would have said faster horses. We believe that a lot of what we are building today are more like faster horses, and we need cars. There are some fundamentally hard problems blocking organizations from accessing that 10x in productivity in the realm of software dev, right? And so the power of that 10x comes from delegating tasks entirely and parallelizing those tasks to agents. And so we think that you need a new sort of platform to do that. One that has an intuitive interface for managing and delegating tasks to agents. You need centralized context from across all of your engineering data sources. You need agents that produce reliably high quality output that you can actually trust. And you need infrastructure that supports thousands of these agents running in parallel when you have an org of, let's say, 5, 10, or 20,000 engineers using it. And so these are really hard problems, but our team has spent the last 2 years partnering with some of the largest organizations in the world to build this exact platform. And so I'm going to just kind of talk a bit about how we see this future evolving. Andre Karpathy said that English is the new programming language, which if you judge this by like AI Twitter or LinkedIn, you might think that already AI has fully replaced software engineers. But we think that that is not at all how the future is going to play out. The vibe coding approach is not going to allow you to solve truly difficult problems, especially in the enterprise. You can't vibe code a Java 7 to Java 21 legacy app migration, right? And so we think that agents aren't a replacement for the human's role, capabilities, and expertise in this process, but instead you can kind of think of them like climbing gear, right? And so building production software is still scaling a mountain. AI climbing gear is not going to replace the mountaineers of today, right? And so better equipment is making these sort of transformations a lot more accessible to organizations. But ultimately, what we've seen is that software developers have this role to play of being the orchestrator and the planner of these agentic systems. And so the differentiation, if you're a software developer, you're an engineering leader, is not going to come from, did I pick the right tool or am I using the right model? But instead, how have I transformed the way that I'm actually using agents, and how is that impacting the way that we ship software? I want to start with a quick video of what's possible today with agents. And so here you can watch systems that we call droids, basically ingesting a high-level task, grounding itself in its environment by using search, using a terminal, accessing tools, checking the Git branch on a machine. And then you can see that droid come back with a plan of exactly what it's going to do in order to solve the task. The user can then come back and say, here's some feedback about how to actually implement that. And from there, the droid is going to autonomously execute on this task. It's going to leverage those tools that I mentioned, its ability to write code, run the CLI, run Git commands, ask the user follow-ups, and ultimately, it's going to go and create a full code change that's ready to merge in CI. And so you can open that up, review it in GitHub, and go from there, right? These sorts of outcomes are becoming table stakes for engineering orgs that are doing agent-driven development, right? The leverage that you gain when you can say, go do this thing, and then go check on that code and see that it's complete is unbelievably high. But how can you actually achieve outcomes like this on a regular basis, right? You may not have seen this same sort of end-to-end completion rate. That might be because you're not using Factory, but we also think that there are a couple other things that you need to think about. At the heart of most AI-effective software development is high-quality context for your agents, right? So a lot of what we call prompt engineering is ultimately us as humans trying to mentally model what information does the agent have or does it not have, right? And so at Factory, we've investigated thousands of these agent interactions with real enterprise software developers, and we kind of built this simple heuristic. It turns out that AI is most likely to fail, not because of the quality of LLMs. LLMs have gotten really good, but instead because of the lack of critical context required to solve the problem, right? And so the solution isn't just wait for smarter models. It's get better at providing the right information to your agents in order to solve that task. LLMs don't know about the morning stand-up. They don't know about the interaction you had in the hall that changed the direction of the implementation, right? So you need to be able to provide those sources of data to agents in order to see success. Platforms like Factory make that really easy, but you don't need necessarily to use our tools. You can also adopt this with any of the agentic coding platforms that you may be already using, right? And so if you expand what you're willing to show agents, they become shockingly helpful. I also want to talk about planning and design with agents. Droids are not only capable at writing code, but they actually solve the harder part of software development, which is figuring out what to build in the first place. Here is an example of a droid that's tasked with basically updating an application to use the latest model from Anthropic. The droid is going to leverage internet search to find forum posts about implementation bugs that aren't in the docs. It's going to search through your product implementation, your PRDs, look through the different architecture implementations, and ultimately, it's going to create this plan for how to actually execute on this problem, right? So planning with AI is fundamentally different from when you were planning alone. You would do this search, you would do this implementation, but importantly, you're not going to ask the agent, just come up with the whole product roadmap, right? Instead, you're going to use it for the groundwork, you're going to use it for the research, and then you as the human and your ability to decide what makes sense and what doesn't, you can take these plans and collaboratively refine them until you have something that you're actually happy with, right? So this isn't something that fully replaces this process of product development, but instead it significantly up-levels what you and your team can do, right? When everybody is doing this, no longer is it sufficient to just have a PRD or have a plan of what to do. Instead, you need to be able to take that plan and go way further. And this is really going to become the new standard for working. I already kind of touched on a bit of how the planning process is going to change, but we really think that this is important to internalize. Like, if you are able to pull in customer interviews, architecture documents, ideas about how your organization already works, transcripts, right? Then you can pull all that info in and do a sort of collaborative discovery process with agents. And the final deliverable, yes, it's helpful to have the LLM to structure it out. You don't have to think as much about certain grammar rules, but you should definitely still be interacting and getting yourself involved in this process, right? And so agents aren't just like an easy solution, but instead just really a new way to do this process. A couple of things that we always tell organizations: you should have these processes internally if you're using agents. You should have PRDs. You should have engineering design docs. You should have RCA templates and quarterly product roadmaps. Before, organizations would see this sort of stuff as overhead. It's bureaucracy, right? But with agent native software development, this process and documentation serves as a knowledge base and a map for your agents, your droids, to imitate the way that your team actually thinks, right? And so documentation and process is now a conversation with your future developers and your future AI systems. Last thing I want to talk about is how we transform site reliability engineering, incident response, and the hardest part of the post-deployment process, which is making sure that things don't break afterwards. In this video, you can see a droid take an incident from Sentry, but this would work for any of your observability platforms, your monitoring tools, and actually work through the context that's fragmented from across your org, right? So if you think about it, incident response is ultimately a puzzle. There's context fragmented from your log system, from your historical responses, from your code base, and the real problem here is how do we piece these things together in a coherent way? If you leverage droids or other agents in your organization, when this alert triggers, you can pull in that context, the system logs, the past incidents, and the droid can use its tools to actually kind of trace the path through this incident. I see that this issue happened here. Here's the timestamps of when that happened. Oh, there's a file that's related that was just changed by an engineer 3 hours before the incident, right? That sort of work could save an hour, 2 hours, and if you're working on a payment system that does 10 billion transactions an hour, right? That could be the difference of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars solving the problem now versus in an hour. And so we think that the acceptable time to acknowledgement and time to resolution of agent-driven software organizations can be effectively zero. And because droids and other future agents have user and organization level memory, every interaction that they have with these sorts of problems is building a model of how your team responds, how it builds software. Right? We've talked about planning, about coding, about site reliability. When you have agent-driven development processes at your org, taking all of these processes together, you start to fill in critical gaps that ultimately really only happen in the heads of your engineers, right? When you have a real software engineer, they do all three of these things. Your droids and your agents should do the same. Here's kind of a useful diagram to kind of think about some of this stuff, about how context can be gathered, how these AI systems can work. And I kind of want to talk about one last thing, which is, most importantly, we're seeing a shift in organizations from reactive software development to proactive software development, right? Because you can see all of these patterns across the end board. Here's where the incidents tend to happen. Here's where the coding problems are taking us the longest amount of time. Here's the bottlenecks in the planning and problem solving process. Then your agents are actually able to surface these things up, and so the second, third, and fourth time that you work on them, you're not just going to get a solution of, hey, here's the fourth incident response. You're going to get a comment like a proactive engineer would say, hey, this is the fourth time this happened. It might be time to think about how to fix this more systematically, right? That is the promise of agent-driven software development. Just some kind of quick final thoughts here in the last minute. We think that the amplification of software developers is at the very early days still. The least amount of software developers that will ever exist today. We're probably going to see 10 to 100x more software developers in the future. And the best developers that we know are spending far less time writing lines of code, writing documents by hand, and far more time thinking about how they can automate and manage agents in their software lifecycle. They're busy thinking about what the opportunity is and less about, is my whole job going to get replaced? It's a silly notion, right? Your job is not going to get replaced by agents. It is about to become way more fun to build software and way more fun to build high quality software. And the future belongs to software developers who can use these agents in a way that's effective. If any of this was interesting and you guys want to try the droids, you can scan this code and you got 20 million free tokens. And so feel free to bring this to your org, give it a try, and see what we mean when we say agent-driven software development. And first and foremost, we're also an enterprise platform. So if you're interested in this and a secure deployment, we're happy to do that too. I've got my email right up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eno. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you made it. The first half of